Well, welcome to our first business stream session at WAFVirtual. And I'm delighted to introduce two speakers who are going to talk about the vexed question of winning work, the inevitable requirement for all architects. And joining us is Susanna Sirefman, President of Dovetail Design Strategists in New York City. And Lee Polisano, a native of New York City, but now based in London as president of PLP Architecture. Welcome to you both, and over to you for some discussion. And perhaps I'll kick off with a question to you, Susanna, which is, tell us some of the bits of general advice that you give to your architect clients when they come to you in the hope of winning work or winning more work.
Well, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with WAFVirtual and in such excellent company. As Paul said, I'm the founder and president of Dovetail Design Strategists. And I thought today I would start by telling you a bit about Dovetail, share how design excellence drives the Dovetail proprietary selection process, and discuss ways in which your own passion for design excellence can help your firm win work. My company, Dovetail, works with a wide range of inspired, forward-looking, and high-profile cultural, institutional, civic, educational, and developer clients, and the occasional individual. We curate and lead the critically vital and important architect or design team selection process for major capital projects. I founded Dovetail in 2008 on the premise that design excellence really matters, and we're now the leading independent architect selection firm in the States. I have a deep knowledge of the global architect ecology, and Dovetail has developed a signature process driven by design excellence. We've crafted and led numerous competitive architect selection processes comprising well over $1 billion of work now built. You most likely have seen some of our projects. Dovetail crafted an international design competition for the City of New York to reimagine the dark, dirty, and unattractive sidewalk sheds, scaffolding that dot our city. The result, the spectacular urban umbrella design, is now popping up in all 5 boroughs and beyond, making for a safer pedestrian and business-friendly streetscape. Dovetail crafted and led a design team selection process for the complete reinvention of the New York Public Library's Mid-Manhattan campus renovation. Both buildings, the main research branch and the main circulating branch, which is about to open, will provide more public space, including a magnificent roof terrace, which will be free to the public. Last fall, we wrapped up a very meaningful international design competition for the selection of a design team for the National Pulse Memorial and Museum in Orlando, which will commemorate the mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in June 2016. It was very moving to see how my client's mandate, "We will not let hate win," resonated with the design community around the world. Let me shift gears for a moment and tell you a bit about my background and how the idea for Dovetail came about. While I was studying to be an architect at the Architectural Association in London, England in the mid-1990s, I was very fortunate to be commissioned to write a book on contemporary architecture in Chicago. I got paid to spend my summer break before my final year of architecture school walking and riding the L all around the great city of Chicago, looking for the best examples of new innovative architecture I could find. Not only did I explore over 228 square miles, I met with almost every single architect in my book, which featured 100 buildings all built within the former decade. The following year, I was commissioned by the same publishers to write a book on contemporary architecture in New York City, following the same format, 100 buildings all built within the last 10 years. I spent another 4 months walking all over New York City's 5 boroughs, and again, met with almost all the architects featured in my book. Although I didn't know it at the time, those first 2 books, 2 of the 5 books I subsequently have written on contemporary architecture, laid the foundations for my perspective on architecture and the groundwork for founding Dovetail many years later. Of course, being trained as an architect myself, I am a fierce advocate for architects. And all of this is driven by my deeper belief that design excellence really matters. Design excellence is an essential element for quality of life. And I've found that the incorporation of all stakeholders is key to achieving this design excellence and key to the success of a project. Dovetail often organizes concept design viewings during a design competition so that stakeholders can weigh in, or sometimes we curate exhibitions following a design competition. This generates excitement and positive publicity for our clients and their projects, making sure everyone is fully informed. It's a great way to smooth the way for project implementation. So, in the broadest possible terms, what evaluation criteria matters most to potential clients, particularly clients with high-profile, complex capital projects in mind? What do you, as architects, need to make crystal clear to potential clients? All Dovetail selection processes are centered on three major criteria: vision, experience, and chemistry. And looking at it from the competitor's vantage point, the Dovetail selection process is tailored to make these three criteria as evident as possible. We structure the process to allow competitors to shine. So vision, how do you as an architect think? How do you and your team approach designing? What's your big picture thinking? Experience, what built work have you done before? Where has your firm built? With whom have you worked? And chemistry, one thing I've learned and I can share with you is that chemistry really matters. I think that from both sides, architect and client, the selection process is a little bit like dating. How does it feel to talk with one another, explore ideas, possibly collaborate? Design excellence is a tough concept to put into words, but we all feel it when we're in a well-designed space. It affects us personally. And furthermore, as architects and designers, we all know that buildings reflect our values and influence our behavior. This is one of the most important aspects of winning work. Understanding the potential client's values and making clear that your work has the capability to position that client's building to reflect these values. Going back to the three big buckets Dovetail has clients look at, this is where your vision comes into play. A clear way to win work is to be compelling and clear in the ways in which your firm's work, your unique creativity or inventiveness will interpret and enhance a client's values. And it's interesting to me that a Dovetail value that has been shared with all our clients is the hiring of diverse teams. The end users for all our projects represent a vast richness of gender and racial diversity, and the teams designing these places need to be equally as diverse. This always makes for the best possible process and end product. Fitting all these pieces together, Dovetail's inclusive process has led to almost all Dovetail projects being built. And I'm often asked by clients if an architect who has not built a particular building type should be on their short list. And while experience with a specific building typology is always a plus, I'm a firm believer that an architect who can design one building typology successfully will design another building type successfully, even if they've not done that type before. Excellent design thinking is fluid and transferable to all building types. And once again, as an advocate for architects and design excellence, the Dovetail-led process allows for both established architects and young and emerging architects who may not have done a particular building type before a shot at getting such a commission. This is simply good business, and I have found that almost everybody understands good design is good business. Flexibility is part of this. We build flexibility into all our design briefs. And I think it's important when pursuing work to make clear that you and your firm are flexible and that your design work is flexible. Particularly in a post-COVID world, buildings will need to be adaptable to a variety of programs. I love this recent image of urban umbrella being used not as scaffolding, but as shelter. It is part of a new design for a front porch to squeeze additional outdoor space for kids entering a school in Brooklyn during the pandemic. Which brings me to another aspect of what I believe is Dovetail's job, which is making my clients' needs and aspirations clear to you, the competitors. Dovetail projects create long-term opportunities and long-term relationships for the winning design team, and both sides, design team and client, need to be sure they respect, enjoy, and want to work together. One of the greatest benefits of the Dovetail process is that it allows for extensive structured dialogue between the competitors and potential future client. This in turn ensures that all parties, both client and competitor, are clear on the project brief and expectations for decision-making. And perhaps one of the most important aspects of the selection process offers an avenue to evaluate chemistry. From your vantage point, going after work, and certainly entering a design competition, is a business decision. Winning work involves understanding who you want to work for, not just the project, but the client. With this in mind, I suggest that you do some research on who the clients are for a project in advance of making the commitment to participate in a competitive selection process. This in turn will hopefully give you and your firm insight into whether or not there will be great chemistry. Find ways to demonstrate similar values, which will lead to compatibility. This can be adding really simple but powerful touches, such as the winning submission for an architect selection process Dovetail ran for a veterinary hospital doing a major renovation. In the bio section of their RFQ submission, adjacent to their own photos, all proposed staff for the project included a photo and the name of their own pet. And of course, my clients loved this. So in a nutshell, the Dovetail-led process is driven by the desire for design excellence for all. We structure the selection process to showcase for our clients the importance of great design thinking and all it can do for their projects and organizations. With that said, I suggest to you all without hesitation that the key to winning work is to make clear during every step of a selection process how your firm's vision, experience, and compatibility to the client's end goals will move them that much closer to where and who their institution being or becoming. Thanks.
Hi. Hi, Paul, and everyone else. Nice to see you. Thank you for asking me to be here today. I have to say this is the first time in my career that anyone's asked me to share my thoughts on winning new work. So I've put down a few things that hopefully will give you an idea about the way we approach things. Without stating the obvious, winning new work is a basic essential for any architect who wants to remain in business. And as such, it's one of the most important groups in our practice, and that's our business development team. And this team focuses on everything from identifying new opportunities to ensuring that we are able to properly respond to them. It's also led by an experienced architect. I think anyone that tells you that they don't devote a good deal of their practice's time and resources to winning new work is probably not being 100% truthful. Having said that, I personally believe that the best way for us to win new work is for us to do the work that we have at the highest level of creativity, innovation, and service that's possible. And for me, this strategy has been the single most successful way for us to win new work. And as such, as an example, 75% of my time and the time of all my partners is actually project-based. This does have its limitations, but it does help us to develop relationships, and relationships are always going to be important in doing the work you have and in winning new work. We get most of our work in the following ways, and they're more or less equally balanced around a third, a third, a third. Competitive interview following a first round selection process. That competitive interview might involve just a pitch presenting the work we have, but it also might involve a new idea or a new approach. Limited design competitions, and these are normally for people who we know or for people who we don't know. And the third one is the point I was making earlier, existing relationships and direct commissions. So they're roughly for us equally balanced at about a third or a third, a third. It's always a challenge for a busy practice to devote necessary resources to new pitches. So for me, it's always been important that we are very, very, very selective about the things we get involved in. This enables us to focus, and it enables us to devote the proper resources into each pitch, and it helps us prepare for them properly. I guess the elephant in the room is competitions. Architects generally have a hard time saying no to them. But we have our own sort of set of criteria that we use for evaluating them. This probably does not work for everyone, but for us, it's the following. We don't enter open competitions. We don't enter unpaid competitions. And we don't do competitions where the brief and the deliverables are not very, very well defined. We also don't enter competitions where we need to win. we use them as a platform to test new ideas, to develop new in-house technologies, to develop new relationships, and to give our people, including some of our younger people, greater experience and a larger platform in the practice. Having said that, if we enter one, we devote our top talent to them as well. I always tell people, and I have for many, many years, don't enter a competition if you feel you need to win it. But take away from it a win regardless of the outcome. And having said that, we do win a reasonable number of them. At any given time, our office probably has 2 or 3 competitions going on alongside a handful of pitches. And this is where you really need to have great people, and you also need to have great discipline and great focus to balance that with their ongoing project time. We also tend to spend a good bit of our time and our resources trying to understand the companies or the institutions that we are working for or that we are pitching to. And one of the things you come to learn as a takeaway and an expectation is that not everyone who commissions an architect actually understands what we do, or understands that there's a big difference between many of us in many instances. And that, I think, is a big point that you need to understand when you approach winning new work. Understand that your client or the potential client may not always understand exactly what it is that you do, and therefore it's important that you explain to them exactly what your practice is about and what you believe you can bring to a project that's different from the rest of us. So that's a little bit about our approach to winning work.
Practices, certainly of any size, are engaged with pitches and competitive situations one way or the other. Now, I remember an exhibition that OMA put on in Rome 3 or 4 years ago. It was called On Hold. And this actually looked at every job number the practice had ever had, and they looked at what proportion had resulted in something being built. It was about 20%. And I guess if you winning 20% of what you go in for, that's a pretty good batting average. But how do you get to that level, or even try to improve on it? And Susanna, I was very taken by your remark about chemistry, the extent to which selection panels and pitching for work is a bit like dating. Sometimes seems like speed dating. Is there any advice you can give people about how to increase the chances of developing that chemistry in an interview situation?
I think before you go into an interview, you have to be really clear on who you're going to be speaking to. I think you have to be strategic about researching who is in charge, who is the big decision maker, and I think you have to really speak to those individuals. You know, it's very difficult now during the pandemic to do any sort of schmoozing pre-interview, but you know, we always like to allow a little time for the team to come in and shake hands and you know, a little bit of eye contact and that sort of thing. Now, you know, virtual interviews, it's not quite as easy, but you absolutely must know who you're talking to, and you have to gear who you're going to bring to that interview to match who you'll be speaking to. I think, you know, obviously the senior leading principal on a project and the project manager should always attend the interview. But, you know, you can bring along others on your team who you think will really, you know, click with those people they'll be talking to.
Now that business about who's on the team that goes for the interview is an interesting one, and perhaps you both like to respond to this. But Susanna, since you've also worked client side, setting up selection processes or competitions, as well as representing architects, I wonder if you have any rules of thumb about, for example, whether these days you must have a woman on the presenting team, or indeed an ethnic minority member, just as a matter of course, or do you think it's best to just keep it absolutely strictly relevant and you only have people in the room who are really going to be involved with the project?
Just to be clear, Paul, we run design competitions and RFQs and all that. I only work for the client. I don't represent any particular architecture firm. Our clients are the clients. But then to answer your question, I think absolutely women should be included. I sort of touched on it in my talk, but all my clients are interested in diversity. They're interested in hiring women architects. They're interested in working with women architects. A lot of my clients have women senior leadership. And certainly their end users are 50% women as well. And the same goes for BIPOC as well. My clients are really interested in diversity. They would like their architecture team to match both who they are and who they're serving.
And Lee, one of your partners, Karen Cook, responsible for the biggest building nearing completion in the City of London. Do you routinely have a sort of balanced mix of gender and age and ethnic minority when you're pitching, or sometimes is it just you?
Well, sometimes it's just me, but not that often. We have probably, I think in the surveys that are done, we're probably one of the most ethnically diverse practices in London in the survey of the top 100 practices. Nearly 60% of our office are female. Many of my most senior people are female, and because we work every place around the world, I guess with the exception of the United States at the moment, we have people from 43 different countries in the practice, and English is a second language in the studio every day. So it means that we bring to the table, if we're pitching for something in Italy, we will have Italian architects, male or female. If we're doing the same thing in Russia, we will have Russian architects. Same thing in Asian countries and things like that. So it is important, but talent and skill is also very, very important. And I don't think we have a problem posting a male or a female that's very, very talented. So I'm quite blessed in that regard. I would say that half the time that you decide on the team mix to take to an interview, you get it right. And half the time that you decide on the team mix and who makes the presentation in an interview, you get it wrong. I've gone to them where people have said, you didn't say a word in the whole presentation, therefore you're clearly not interested in our project, and we went with someone else. And I've gone to some where people have said, you gave all the presentation, we didn't hear, you're fantastic, but you're not going to be around to do any of our work. So we wanted to hear from someone else. So, in my place, I get it right. We get it right 50% of the time, and that's about as good as it gets.
Can I
think those are very. I was going to say, Susanna, these are very interesting points. Now, from client side, what do you expect, and what do you like to hear? Do you want to see the boss at every presentation, or do you prefer to see the person you're going to maybe your client's going to be spending 3 or 5 years with on a project?
Right. So it's really interesting, actually, what Lee said, because one of my own pet peeves and clients alike is when a team shows up and they've got all the sub-consults sitting there and they don't say a word for the hour and 15-minute interview, and it just, they're staring at the ceiling. So I think that the criticism that you're talking about, Lee, I think these things need to be carefully choreographed, and I think no one should be in the room that is not going to speak. I think certainly American clients always like to see, certainly at the initial interview, the big name, the lead principal. They want to, even though they know that they're not going to be seeing that person, weekly, daily, monthly. They want to know that they will be getting, some level of attention from the name on the door. I think it's equally as important to bring the project manager, the person, that's where the chemistry comes in. Is this someone that they want to spend the next 5 years with? But I think, I'm a big proponent for firms rehearsing what they're going to say. I know it seems really tedious, and you probably do a gazillion presentations all the time, but there's really something to be said for having a quick run through in the office for people who are not on the team, so that it really comes across as thought out, choreographed, equal. I've seen successful presentations by only one presenter, but more often than not, certainly in today's environment, my clients really like to understand how you collaborate and work together as a team.
Maybe I could bring Lee back in on this one. Do you tend to take along engineers, environmental engineers, cost consultants, or do you focus on the architects?
It depends. I think what Susanna is talking about is a particularly American thing. Most of my clients are interested in ideas, and the people we pitch to, they're interested in how we're going to bring something innovative to the table. And as such, we bring the people who we think are going to basically do that. We would never go to an interview without the lead design team on a project. And the project manager, but we would also make sure that the lead design team would be on the project, because people are hiring us to design something for them and to create something special. Having said that, I do find it really depends on the client. If you're presenting to someone whose first language is not English, having multiple people speak tends to be confusing at times. If you're presenting through a translator, which we sometimes have to do, same thing goes. It tends to be difficult for individuals to follow more than one person presenting, because you need time for the material to be translated and things like that. So it really does depend on the type of project, the time of the amount of time you have for an interview. We have a presentation coming up later this week, very, very important project. We have 7 minutes to present, we've been told. We've worked on the project for a year. And so it's not a project where it will be one where one single individual will present it. And we've been rehearsing the presentation every day for the last month. So I think it depends. It really does depend on the situation.
Can I ask you whether you find big cultural differences in expectation? I mean, Lee, you've worked across the world. Are there recognizable differences in different geographic areas, or is it much more dependent on the nature of the client?
No, it is. There are differences. For example, we have a small office in Tokyo, and that's proved to be very, very successful for us. All of our Japanese clients or would-be clients, when we talk to them, are very idea focused, and they're very interested in ideas that would not just generally relate to their particular project that we're there to talk about. They're interested in a discussion about a broader range of ideas around the built environment. Similarly, other Asian countries where we work, Singapore, for example, very big focus on environmental issues. Our European clients now tend to be interested in those sort of things. The new green renovation revolution in Europe that's happening is very, very topical, and a very, very interesting place for architects, I think, to win work if you're focused on those kinds of things. So I really think it depends. We're doing some very, very innovative work around technology and architecture in Russia, for example, where there's a big, big focus on the power of technology and the built environment, things like that. So it really, really varies between places.
And Susanna, the USA is a continent, or the biggest part of a continent. Do you find cultural differences within different cities in the US? Are there different assumptions in California to say NYC?
I think yes. We're very lucky in that Dovetail clients are all very interested in design, and they're interested in sustainability, and they're interested in sort of being forward-looking. So, our clients tend to be somewhat similar in that aspect. I think on the East Coast, there's a maybe a more of a feeling that they want to work with in architecture who've worked with in North America before, whereas the West Coast maybe is a little bit more willing to go out on a limb. But I think that that's changing. And I have to say, all our clients are super smart. And I think that when you go about trying to win work, you have to approach it with the attitude that the clients are smart. And even if they're lay people, they want to understand what you're doing. And I think, making things as accessible and clear and pellucid, but always understanding that, these are all, very, very intelligent people who might not be in your field. I know Lee had touched on the fact that sometimes potential clients don't really understand what architects do. I think they understand more than you think they do. And I think it's really important to make architects have a tendency to sometimes obfuscate what they're doing, and it's just, I find that unnecessary. I think clarity is always key.
What about timekeeping for presentations, Susanna? Because I've seen plenty of presentations where the timing's gone completely haywire, and I've said to architects that if you go over on time on your presentation, the client thinks that actually you're going to live with years of this sort of thing, and if you can't get a 10-minute presentation right, or perhaps a 7-minute one, what are the chances of the building coming in on time? I mean, there are little sort of symbolic moments in presentations, aren't there?
Absolutely. And we tell our clients that every step of the selection process is a screening. And I mean, 7 minutes, I think, is not fair, particularly for such an important project, which is also, another advantage to Dovetail in that, we're very clear on the amount of time. And we certainly, make sure that there's ample time. We know that our competitors are working hard. And I want to be as fair as possible to everybody. But the other side of the coin is absolutely, Paul. There are, when I'm running a process, when Dovetail's running a process, we will cut people off. But we're very clear from the get-go that, you have 25 minutes, or you have a half hour, or you have, 40 minutes to talk, and that is it. So it's generally not for us an issue, but I have been at other presentations which seem to go on. And there's definitely something to be said for concision.
I mean, there's a famous film that people can watch on YouTube of various international architects doing presentations, and the only one who, by sort of common cause, anyone thought actually said what the project was about and how they were going to do it was Norman Foster, whereas there was a lot of theorizing and philosophizing from a whole variety of other big name architects. And it's a very amusing clip. Lee, have you seen that one?
Yes. Yeah, I have. I think.
And
sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think it actually is quite important to talk about your firm, but also to talk about the reason that you're in the room, which is, you're invited in there by people who want you to tell them about their project and how you're going to deliver their project. And I think that's very, very important. And I would agree that keeping to time is a good discipline. It's a good discipline to prepare you for the interview and the presentation as well. And it allows you to focus on the key ideas, which is one of the reasons why we tend to be very selective as well, so that we can devote the time to that we think is necessary to prepare for these sort of things.
Now, here's a question for both of you, but I'll stay with Lee just for the moment, which is the vexed question of, should we make a model? Because sometimes you can see that people have spent fortunes on making a model of a completed project before they've even won the competition and had a chance to go into the brief in further detail with the client. Do you have a view about model making?
It's changed. It's now, should we make a film? But I think if a model is required, then we will make a model. If a model is specifically excluded, we will not make one. If it's left silent and optional, I'd say 9 out of 10 times we'll make a model. And the reason is we're quite blessed with a very, very talented and large model making facility here that does all kinds of things, from product prototyping to models. And we actually learn quite a bit about what we're doing when we make models. So, but if it's excluded and it's specifically stated, do not make a model, we will not make a model.
Susanna, Lee makes a good point about maybe the film or the animation is the equivalent or an appendage to a model these days. Do your clients like to see that kind of material, filmed material at presentations, even if they didn't ask for it?
Well, in an interest in leveling the playing field, Dovetail is quite prescriptive about deliverables. So if we won't run a design competition unless there's compensation. As Lee pointed out, he won't enter one if there's no compensation. So for a typical RFQ, RFP interview process, we would there would not be an expectation or an acceptance of a film or a model. But for a design competition, we're very clear on certainly whether or not we want a short film or the size and scale of a model. Films are fantastic and I think very useful, and my clients love seeing them. And it's a great tool to understand ideas. And the same goes for a model as well. But as I said, we're fairly prescriptive about when it's expected.
And can I ask you whether public consultation and an architect's skill in being able to handle consultations and deal with communities, whether that is typically something that you investigate when on behalf of your clients? Is that something they're looking for? And then Lee, you might want to comment on that also. But Susanna first.
Well, I think it's very depends on what the project is. If there's going to be, we call it community engagement, what you call public consultation, and Dovetail is incredibly clear about what the scope of work that's expected from a firm for a project. So, we've seen submissions where a firm, relatively young firms, more typical, will team up with community engagement specialists and that sort of thing. Some projects it's required, some projects it's not. And yes, we do, we certainly check references, talk to prior clients. If that is an aspect of the scope of work, we certainly would want some evidence of success in that area.
Thank you. Lee, final comment on that?
Yeah, look, the nature of architecture is changing. I mean, the last 10 people that we hired have not been architects. And when we put teams together now for projects or to pitch projects and things like that, they have an enormous variety of other types of skills that are not around engineering and project management and costs. They're around not just environment, they're around social issues. They have a focus on social issues, fairness in cities, and other types of things like that. And so I think the more you realize about our business, the more it comes that you start to assemble very, very interesting groups of people to deliver these things. And I think the more you can do around that, the bigger advantage you will have.
That's great. Lovely note to end on. Thank you so much for your contributions here. The first business session at WAFVirtual. Very interesting stuff. Good luck with the competition, Lee. Susanna, thank you very much for your time today.